It was a typical Florida afternoon, the sun filtering through the swaying palms, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. The air was warm, humid, and heavy with a familiar sense of grass and pine. Richard Wilbanks, a retired businessman with a love for nature, and his beloved Cavalier King Charles Spaniel Gunner had developed a cherished routine. Each day they would walk along the edge of a small pond near their home, enjoying the peace and serenity that only the Florida wilderness could provide. Little did they know, this afternoon would be anything but peaceful. The tranquil stroll was abruptly shattered when a sudden, violent splash came from the water's surface. In an instant, the once calm pond had turned into a scene of chaos. Without warning, a menacing alligator, its scaly back almost invisible against the murky water, exploded into view, its jaws snapping open in a blur of speed. In a heart-stopping moment, the creature lunged directly at Gunner, its cold, reptilian eyes locking onto the unsuspecting pup. Before Richard could react, the alligator had clamped its powerful jaws around Gunner's small body, dragging him into the water with terrifying force. The world seemed to freeze in that instant, the joyful barking of moments before replaced by a sickening silence. The pond, which once represented calm and solace, had turned into a battlefield. Richard's heart dropped, but only for a second. Instinct and adrenaline surged through him like electricity, pushing aside all fear and reason. Without hesitation, he threw his cigar aside, kicked off his shoes, and hurled himself into the pond with a ferocity he never knew he possessed. The cool water rushed over him as he swam with purpose, his eyes fixated on the thrashing figure of the alligator. Though small compared to some of Florida's monstrous reptiles, this gator was still a formidable adversary. The water churned as the beast attempted to submerge Gunner, intending to drown its prey in a classic gator death roll. But Richard wasn't about to let that happen. The elderly man reached the alligator in seconds, plunging his hands into the water with an intensity that only pure love and desperation could summon. He could feel the gator's rough, slimy skin beneath his fingers, its muscles tensed as it clamped down harder on Gunner. Time seemed to stretch as Richard, gripped by a primal sense of protectiveness, began the unimaginable wrestling the alligator. With bare hands and sheer determination, Richard grappled with the creature, adrenaline numbing him to the pain of its powerful jaws. He could hear Gunner's faint whimpers beneath the water, and it drove him to push harder, to dig deeper. He pried his fingers into the alligator's jaws, ignoring the sharp teeth cutting into his skin. It felt like a lifetime, but finally, after what seemed like an eternity of struggle, he managed to force the gator's mouth open just wide enough. With a desperate wriggle, Gunner broke free from the beast's grip, paddling toward the safety of the shore. Miraculously, the pup had escaped with only a minor puncture wound on his side, a true stroke of luck, considering the peril he had just faced. But for Richard, the ordeal was far from over. He could feel the sharp sting of the gator's teeth sinking into his hands and arms, the pressure threatening to crush bone. Blood streamed from deep gashes, turning the water a faint red. But even with the excruciating pain, Richard refused to let the gator win. He pushed the creature off with the last of his strength, and the alligator, sensing its prey was lost, retreated back into the depths of the pond. Gasping for breath, Richard dragged himself onto the shore, collapsing beside Gunner. For a moment, both man and dog simply lay there, panting and shaking, as the enormity of what had just happened washed over them. Richard's hands throbbed, the flesh torn and raw from the battle, but as he looked over at Gunner, his tail beginning to wag despite the trauma, he felt a surge of relief. Neighbors, hearing the commotion, rushed to the scene. They were horrified by the sight of Richard's bloodied hands and the still form of Gunner, but within minutes it was clear that both were alive and incredibly lucky to be so. One of the neighbors had already called emergency services, and paramedics soon arrived to tend to Richard's wounds, wrapping his hands in bandages and ensuring Gunner's puncture wound was cleaned and treated. As the days passed, Richard found himself recovering both physically and mentally from the ordeal. The pain in his hands was a constant reminder of the fierce battle, but it was the memory of the struggle, the primal terror of nearly losing Gunner, that lingered in his mind. He found solace in the simple, everyday moments with Gunnar, watching the pup chase squirrels, bark at passing birds, and snuggle up to him at night as if nothing had happened. To the outside world, Gunnar seemed none the worse for wear, his usual playful spirit undiminished. Word of Richard's heroic act soon spread like wildfire, with local news outlets covering the story. When a neighbor's doorbell camera footage of the incident surfaced, it quickly went viral. Within hours, the video had amassed hundreds of thousands of views. Viewers around the world watched in awe as Richard, clad in everyday clothes with a cigar hanging from his mouth, fearlessly dove into the water to save his dog. The comments poured in, people hailing Richard as a hero, marveling at his bravery and quick thinking. "This guy's a legend," one viewer commented. "Florida man strikes again." Alligator didn't stand a chance. Despite the widespread praise, Richard remained humble. He brushed off the compliments, saying only that he did what any dog owner would do in that situation. "Gunnar's part of my family," he told reporters. "I didn't think, I just acted." The viral video also sparked broader conversations about the delicate balance between humans and wildlife. Florida, with its sprawling suburban developments and numerous bodies of water, had always been home to alligators, but as more people moved into these areas, encounters were becoming more frequent. Wildlife experts chimed in, reminding pet owners to be vigilant near water and to always keep their dogs on a leash, especially in gator territory. Richard took those lessons to heart. From then on, Gunnar's walks were different, always on a leash, always far from the water's edge. The pond that had once been their peaceful sanctuary now felt like enemy territory. But Richard didn't mind. He'd take the extra precautions if it meant keeping Gunnar safe. Though life returned to normal, the bond between Richard and Gunnar had grown even stronger. Every wag of Gunnar's tail, every playful bark was a reminder of what they had survived together. And though Richard's hands bore the scars of his heroic battle, he wore them with pride. Each time he looked at them, he was reminded of that incredible day, the day he fought an alligator and won, all in the name of love.